So I'm sitting here at 40, wondering how the hell my life became such a financial nightmare, starring my wife's family as the main villains. This is going to be long, but trust me, the revenge is worth every word. Let me paint the picture of my birthday disaster. Turning 40 felt like this massive milestone, but honestly, it just felt like staring at new gray hairs and getting excited about good sleep. But screw that noise. I decided Marcus Blake was going to celebrate himself properly for once. If you want something done right, do it yourself, right? I went full military precision on this party, spent 3 weeks researching venues in our city, which is like finding decent parking at the mall during Christmas. Nearly impossible and way overpriced. Finally found this intimate spot downtown called the Blue Room with exposed brick walls, amber lighting that made everyone look like whiskey commercial models. And most importantly, a live saxophonist who could make even the phone book sound romantic. The manager, Elena, this cool woman with purple hair streaks, gave me the full tour. We arranged mood lighting that would make Sinatra jealous, cocktail tables positioned perfectly for mingling, and a small stage where the sax player could work his magic. She even suggested the ideal spot for my cake under this gorgeous vintage chandelier. Speaking of the cake, I spent way too much time at Giuseppe's bakery explaining exactly what I wanted. This elderly Italian baker clearly thought I was nuts for caring so much about frosting consistency, but finally understood my vision. Simple but elegant chocolate base with vanilla buttercream and written in bold letters across the top. Marcus, still rising. Yeah, maybe cheesy, but sometimes a man needs to be his own hype squad. Then came the invitations. I crafted these things like I was announcing a royal wedding. Classy cardstock, elegant font, the whole 9 yards. Send them to everyone who mattered. My parents, college buddies, work crew, neighbors who'd become genuine friends. But the most important invitation went to Diana, my wife of 8 years, the woman who was supposed to be my partner in all this life craziness. I had this whole vision. I could picture her walking in wearing that red dress she looks absolutely winner in, the one from her cousin's wedding that made every guy in the room forget their own names. I imagined her laughing at my cake message, rolling her eyes in that affectionate way she used to do when I get overly excited about something. I pictured us toasting with champagne, her giving one of those speeches that would make everyone remember why they loved us as a couple. The night arrived, and I showed up at 6:30 sharp in my best suit, the navy one that actually fits properly since I started hitting the gym again. The place looked perfect. Elena had outdone herself with the setup. The lighting was absolutely perfect, and the saxophonist was already warming up with some smooth Miles Davis. I positioned myself near the entrance like some eager host, checking my watch and phone every 30 seconds. 7 o'clock rolled around. No problem, right? People are fashionably late these days. I ordered a beer from Rico the bartender, this laid-back dude with sleeve tattoos who looked like he'd seen every kind of human drama play out in his bar. He poured me a perfect pint and gave me this knowing nod that said, "Don't worry, man, they'll show." 8 o'clock came and went. The saxophonist switched from upbeat jazz to something slower, more mellow. Maybe people were running really late. I checked the group text I'd sent with all the details, delivered, but nobody was responding. Called my buddy Travis, straight to voicemail. Tried my sister Kelly, same thing. Even texted my mom, who usually responds faster than a teenager with a crush. By 9 o'clock, the truth hit me like a freight train loaded with disappointment. Nobody was coming, not my college friends who I'd stayed in touch with for 20 years. Not my work buddies who I'd covered for during their personal emergencies. Not my family who I'd been there for through divorces and job losses. And most painful of all, not Diana, not my wife, who was supposed to be my ride or die, my constant, my person. I sat there in that beautiful lounge surrounded by empty chairs and tables set for guests who clearly had better things to do, trying to process what the hell had just happened. The saxophonist was playing something slow and melancholy now, like he could sense the mood shift. Other patrons were stealing glances at me. The guy sitting alone at what was obviously supposed to be a party, looking like the saddest birthday boy in history. Rico, bless his soul, must have recognized the situation for what it was. He walked over with a rocks glass filled with what looked like top-shelf bourbon and set it down in front of me. "For the birthday, man," he said simply. No pity in his voice, just recognition. That's when I knew I either had to laugh or cry, and laughing seemed better for my dignity. I walked over to my perfect cake, sitting there under that gorgeous chandelier like some monument to misplaced optimism. Cut myself one slice, a generous one, because screw portion control on your birthday, and sat back down. I ate that cake slowly, savoring every bite of Giuseppe's excellent work. pretending the scattered groups of other customers weren't occasionally glancing over with that particular mix of curiosity and sympathy that made my skin crawl. The worst part wasn't even eating cake alone. The worst part was walking out afterward, thanking Elena for a lovely evening like everything had gone according to plan, tipping Rico extra for his kindness, and making that long walk to my car in the parking garage. Every step felt like walking through molasses, like the universe was making damn sure I felt every second of that humiliation. A week passed after my spectacular birthday disaster, and I'd almost convinced myself that maybe life could go back to some semblance of normal. You know that feeling when you stub your toe really hard and for a few seconds you think it might not hurt that bad, then the pain hits like a sledgehammer? Yeah, that's basically what happened when my phone decided to ruin my Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in the most boring quarterly budget meeting known to mankind, listening to Janet from accounting drone on about expense reports, when my phone buzzed against my leg. Normally, I'm pretty disciplined about ignoring personal stuff during work hours, but something about that particular buzz felt different. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was just bad luck. But I decided to sneak a quick peek. The message was from Diana, and the preview made my stomach drop faster than a lead balloon. Hey, we're doing Dad's milestone at Lakeside, $2,100 each. Venmo me by Friday. D. I excused myself from the meeting, mumbling something about a bathroom emergency that wasn't entirely a lie, considering how my digestive system was reacting to this news. Found an empty conference room and opened the full message. And let me tell you, it was a masterpiece of audacity wrapped in casual entitlement. That was it. No, hey honey, how are you doing? No, sorry your birthday party was a complete bust because we all suck as human beings. No explanation, no discussion, no acknowledgement that maybe asking someone for $2,100 might warrant an actual conversation. Just a bill. A damn invoice disguised as a family text. Here's the thing about Harold Morrison, my father-in-law. The man loves grand gestures the way most people love breathing. We're talking about a guy who once rented out an entire restaurant for his wife's birthday, complete with string quartet and ice sculptures. Because apparently regular birthday dinners are for peasants. His wife Sandra has turned other people's generosity into an art form. She's got this magical ability to make everyone around her feel like funding her elaborate schemes is not just expected, but somehow a privilege. I watched the family group chat light up like a Christmas tree with responses. First came Bethany, Diana's younger sister, with her predictably enthusiastic paid can't wait, followed by party popper emojis. Then Marcus, Diana's older brother, chimed in with a thumbs up emoji and all set. I stared at that group chat, watching everyone enthusiastically throw money at Harold's milestone celebration while I sat there remembering my empty birthday party. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Something inside me just snapped. Not in a loud, dramatic way, more like a quiet, decisive click, like a door closing that you know isn't going to open again anytime soon. I scrolled back up to Diana's message, hit reply, and typed exactly what my brain was thinking. $1 with the note. Congratulations, one single solitary dollar. Because technically, that's still paying my share of something, right? And honestly, it felt like exactly what this situation was worth. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started on what would become the most liberating afternoon I'd had in years. I muted that family group chat faster than you'd mute a car alarm at 3 a.m. Then I opened my banking app and started systematically cutting off financial access like I was performing surgery on my own wallet. First, I removed Diana as an authorized user on my credit card. You know, that card she'd been using for household expenses, that somehow always included things like manicures and boutique purchases that had absolutely nothing to do with keeping our house running. Then I canceled the spare card she kept in the kitchen drawer, the one she claimed was for emergencies but seemed to be used for a suspiciously large number of non-emergency Starbucks runs. Next up was Zelle access to our joint account because apparently our joint account had become less joint and more Marcus's money that everyone else has access to. I turned off her ability to transfer money faster than she could say, but it's for family. The whole process took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like I was taking my life back. One security setting at a time. Every password change, every access revocation, every protective measure I put in place felt like building a wall around my sanity. When I was done playing financial defense, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked myself a hotel room. Not because I was leaving Diana permanently, but because I needed space to think without someone asking me to fund their thoughts. I chose a nice place downtown, Nothing fancy, but clean and quiet with room service and cable TV and absolutely zero family members asking for money. Before I left the office, I cleaned out my desk drawer and found my house key, the one I'd carried for 8 years of marriage like some symbol of domestic stability. Drove home, walked into our kitchen, and left that key in the little ceramic dish by the door, where we always left mail and receipts. Then I grabbed a bag, threw in enough clothes for a few days, and walked out of my own house like I was leaving someone else's life behind. The hotel room was perfect. Quiet, clean, and most importantly, mine. I ordered room service, a ridiculous burger with truffle fries that cost way too much and tasted like freedom, and settled in for my first peaceful evening in longer than I could remember. For the first time in years, silence felt like oxygen instead of suffocation. 2 days of hotel room peace had done wonders for my mental state. I was actually starting to feel like a human being again instead of a walking ATM with abandonment issues. So naturally, the universe decided it was time to screw with me again. I was sitting in our glass conference room going over quarterly numbers with Angela Rodriguez, my team lead, when I noticed something weird happening in the main office area. People were turning their heads toward the reception desk, and there was this subtle shift in office energy that happens when something unusual is going down. Then I saw them. 2 uniformed police officers walking through the office like they owned the place, heading straight for our conference room. The taller officer, a black woman with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen every type of human stupidity imaginable, knocked on our conference room door. Her name tag read Officer Williams, and she had the kind of direct eye contact that made you want to confess to crimes you hadn't even committed. "Are you Marcus Blake?" she asked. I nodded slowly, my brain racing through every possible reason why 2 cops would show up at my workplace. "Sir, we got a report. Welfare check," said the other officer, whose name tag identified him as Officer Chen. "Your wife says you're missing." Missing. I sat there for a moment, processing that word like it was written in a foreign language. "I'm not missing," I said, keeping my voice as flat and professional as possible. "I'm working." Officer Williams's expression softened slightly, like she was starting to piece together what was really going on here. "Mind explaining the no contact?" she asked. So I explained. Not the whole pathetic story, but the basics. I talked about setting boundaries, about needing space from people who treated me like a personal bank account, about how family had somehow become a password that gave people unlimited access to my wallet and zero obligation to treat me with basic respect. "Look," Williams said when I finished, "if you don't call them, they might escalate this. File more reports, maybe claim you're having some kind of mental health crisis. You don't want that kind of paperwork following you around." The implication was clear. Handle this before it becomes a bigger problem. "If they show up here again," I said, making sure my voice carried the kind of quiet authority that people don't usually argue with, "I'll file for a protective order." Both officers nodded, and I could tell they weren't surprised by this response. That night, I sat in my hotel room trying to process the fact that my own wife had called the cops on me for the crime of not answering my phone for 2 days. So I did something I probably should have done years ago. I went home to gather evidence of exactly how screwed up my financial life had become. Diana wasn't home, which was probably for the best. I grabbed my laptop, a legal pad, and every financial document I could find, then spread it all out on our kitchen table like I was preparing for the world's most depressing tax audit. Let me tell you something about keeping receipts. Most people are terrible at it, but me, I'm apparently a masochist who keeps detailed records of his own financial misuse. Every wire transfer, every canceled check, every credit card statement going back 5 years, all neatly organized in folders. I started with Harold's roof repair from 3 years ago. The man called me on a Tuesday morning, voice all shaky with panic, talking about how a storm had damaged his roof and insurance was being difficult, and he needed $9,500 immediately, or the whole house might collapse. Being the dutiful son-in-law, I transferred the money that same day. Did I ever see an insurance report? Nope. Did Harold ever pay me back? Also nope. But Harold's emergency roof was just the beginning. Next up was Bethany's boutique launch, which apparently required $17,200 for inventory and setup costs. Bethany had this whole business plan she presented during Sunday dinner, complete with a PowerPoint about sustainable fashion and market demographics. The boutique lasted exactly 6 months before she decided retail was too stressful, and she wanted to focus on her yoga certification instead. Then there was Marcus's crypto catastrophe, which still makes my eye twitch when I think about it. That brilliant investment strategy cost me $13,400 after Marcus called me, sobbing, actual sobbing, about how he'd put his entire savings into some cryptocurrency with a ridiculous meme name. Sandra got on the phone after him, talking about how he was learning valuable lessons about financial responsibility and how family helps family through difficult times. As I went through each folder, each receipt, each wire confirmation, a pattern emerged that was so obvious I felt stupid for not seeing it earlier. Every emergency happened to occur right around the time I got a bonus at work, or a tax refund, or some other influx of cash. Every crisis was urgent enough to require immediate financial intervention, but never quite urgent enough for anyone to explore other options first. By midnight, I had tallied up 5 years of Morrison family expenses, and the number made me physically nauseous. We're talking about $97,300. Enough money to buy a decent car or put a down payment on a vacation home or fund a pretty substantial retirement account. Instead, it had all disappeared into the black hole of other people's poor life choices and manufactured emergencies. But the real gut punch came when I started looking at my own marriage through this financial lens. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through text messages from Diana over the past year, and Jesus Christ, it was like reading a greatest hits collection of manipulation tactics. "You know how my parents are," she'd text, after yet another request for money, as if Harold and Sandra's inability to manage their finances was some kind of natural disaster we all just had to accept. "Just this once," she'd say about expenses that happened with suspicious regularity. "We'll square it later," was another favorite, and my personal favorite. It's what married couples do, because apparently being married meant signing up to fund your in-laws' lifestyle while your own birthday party sat empty. I remembered that empty table at the Blue Room, the cake I cut for myself, the walk to my car that felt like a funeral procession for my self-respect. And then, a week later, not love, not apology, not even acknowledgement, just another damn invoice. That's when I made the decision that should have been obvious years ago. I wrote down my new rule on a sticky note and stuck it to my laptop screen. Rule #1, I will not fund disrespect. Simple, clear, and long overdue. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with the kind of clarity that usually only comes after a really good fever breaks. I ordered room service coffee and made a strategic battle plan for reclaiming my financial independence. Time to cut off the money pipeline that had been feeding the Morrison family circus for way too long. First stop, the bank. I called customer service and explained that I needed to speak with someone in fraud prevention because, let's be honest, that's exactly what this was. The rep transferred me to Jennifer Walsh, who had one of those calm, professional voices that immediately made me feel like I was talking to someone who'd seen every type of financial screwery known to mankind. "I need to remove spousal access on all my accounts," I told her, "and revoke all external connections to joint accounts." After confirming my identity, she walked me through the process like a surgeon explaining a procedure. Every authorization Diana had to view my personal accounts, gone. Every automatic transfer setup between our joint account and her personal spending, terminated. Next, I called my lawyer, Rebecca Martinez. I'd met Rebecca 3 years ago when we bought the house. "Rebecca, it's Marcus Blake. I need a full family financial audit. What I've paid out over the last 5 years." "How detailed?" she asked. "Everything. Every transfer, every loan, every emergency expense. I want documentation of every dollar I've given to my wife's family, and I want legal options for recovery." "Will you litigate to recover?" That was the million-dollar question. "Rebecca," I said, thinking about my empty birthday party and that text demanding $2,100 like I was some kind of family ATM. "I turned 40 last week. I'm finally sure about a lot of things." "I'll start the audit today," she said. "Give me 2 weeks for a complete analysis." The next afternoon, I was having a decent day at work when my phone rang with a call from building security. "Mr. Blake, this is Tony downstairs. You've got some visitors in the lobby, and they're pretty insistent about seeing you." My stomach dropped because I had a pretty good idea who they were. "Absolutely not. I'll be right down." When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, I could hear them before I could see them. Specifically, I could hear Sandra's voice echoing through the marble lobby like she was addressing a shareholders meeting. They were standing near the reception desk in formation. Diana in the center looking furious, Sandra on her right looking indignant, and Bethany on her left looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Diana spotted me first and immediately launched into attack mode. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the lobby. "You froze the cards!" Sandra stepped forward, gearing up for one of her legendary guilt trips. "Harold's milestone is this weekend," she hissed. "He deserves it." The word deserves hit me like a slap. Harold deserves a party that costs his family members $2,100 each, but I didn't deserve a wife showing up to my birthday. Bethany rolled her eyes. "This isn't about your little party," she said with a dismissive tone, and that's when something inside me snapped. "That's the problem," I said, looking directly at each of them. "Nothing is about me except the bill." The silence that followed was beautiful. You could practically hear the gears turning in their heads as they tried to process the fact that their personal ATM had just grown a backbone. "We're done talking in public," I continued, still keeping my voice calm. "Email my lawyer." Walking into Rebecca's law office the next morning felt like stepping into an alternate universe where competence and professionalism actually existed. Rebecca was waiting for me with a stack of papers thick enough to stop a bullet. "The total amount you've paid for Morrison family expenses over the past 5 years is $97,300, she said, sliding a single sheet across her desk. I stared at that number like it was written in hieroglyphics. That wasn't just money, that was a car, a down payment on a house, a year of salary for some people. "It gets more specific," Rebecca continued. "Harold's medical procedures and deductibles, $16,800. Bethany's boutique launch and subsequent business expenses, $17,200. Marcus's debt settlement after his cryptocurrency adventure, $13,400. Then we have the smaller but more frequent expenses. Sandra's charity events, $4,900. Various credit card payoffs for the family, $21,300. And a dozen different emergencies totaling $23,700. "What are my options?" I asked. Rebecca pulled out another document that looked official and intimidating. "I've drafted a demand letter. It outlines every expense, provides documentation for each transaction, and gives them 30 days to repay the full amount, or we file suit for recovery." "Send it," I said. As if on cue, my phone rang, Diana's contact photo popping up on the screen. "Answer it," Rebecca suggested, "but put it on speaker." "You're suing my family?" Diana's voice was thick with anger. "I'm asking for repayment," I said. "Suing is step 2. What followed was a 10-minute masterclass in guilt manipulation and emotional blackmail. She talked about loyalty and sacrifice, about how family members support each other, about how I was being petty and vindictive over money we could afford to give. "I'm loyal to people who are loyal to me," I said when she finally paused. "Loyal people attend their husband's 40th. Then I hung up. The next few weeks were like watching a masterclass in how quickly people's priorities can shift when their access to free money gets cut off. The first sign that my demand letter had hit its target came exactly 3 days after Rebecca sent it. I got a text from Bethany. "Did you see they listed the cabin?" Attached was a link to a real estate listing for Harold and Sandra's weekend cabin, the same cabin where they'd hosted family gatherings for years. The listing price was $48,000, probably about half what they'd paid for it. 2 days later, Luis from my team mentioned seeing a vintage motorcycle for sale on Craigslist that looked exactly like the one Harold was always bragging about. I looked up the listing, and sure enough, there was Harold's pride and joy, a 1973 Harley-Davidson he'd restored himself. The asking price was $9,200, probably half what that bike was actually worth. But my personal favorite development came from Bethany's increasingly creative attempts to negotiate. She sent me a text. "Hey Marcus, what if I could work something out with store inventory? I still have a lot of pieces from the boutique, high-end stuff. Maybe we could call it even on some of what I owe." Store inventory. She wanted to pay me back with unsold clothes from her failed business venture. The audacity was almost artistic. I forwarded the text to Rebecca without comment. The real masterpiece came from Marcus, who apparently decided we were somehow buddies who could work things out with a casual text conversation. "Bro, we're family," he texted at 11:30 on a Thursday night. "This whole legal thing is crazy. Can't we just figure something out between us? You know I'm good for it. Eventually." Eventually. That was the magic word that had gotten me into this mess in the first place. I typed back, "Then act like it." 2 weeks later, I ran into Harold at a bowling alley where my team was having a night out. He looked older than I remembered, moving with careful deliberation. He caught my eye and, to my complete surprise, walked over. "Marcus," he said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it, I was wrong to ignore your birthday. I'm sorry. Sorry. Harold Morrison, the man who'd never apologized for anything in the 8 years I'd known him, was standing in a bowling alley telling me he was sorry. Not sorry for treating me like an ATM, not sorry for the $97,300 his family had extracted from my bank account, but sorry for ignoring my birthday. I didn't rush to forgive him. Instead, I just nodded and picked up my bowling ball. Want to bowl a frame? I asked. He nodded and we played one frame without speaking. There was something almost meditative about it. The weight of the ball, the sound of pins falling, the simple physics of aim and follow through. Finally, as I was lining up for my next frame, Harold spoke again. I taught my kids that money fixes everything, he said, his voice barely audible over the sound of pins crashing. That was my mistake. It wasn't a full admission of guilt, not an acknowledgement of the specific damage his family had done, but something that felt like the beginning of actual honesty. Teach them what respect costs, I said. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't forgiveness either. It was simply the truth. We shook hands then, the kind of handshake that belongs to endings rather than beginnings. It was firm, brief, and final. Not the handshake of reconciliation, but the handshake of two men who finally understood where they stood with each other. Walking out into the parking lot, I thought about the difference between apologizing for specific actions and apologizing for the character flaws that made those actions inevitable. Harold was sorry he'd ignored my birthday, but I wasn't sure he was sorry for raising children who thought love came with invoices attached. But you know what? That was Harold's work to figure out, not mine. I'd spent 8 years trying to fix other people's relationships with money and responsibility, and all it had gotten me was an empty birthday party and a legal demand for $97,300 in restitution. Back at the hotel, I did something I probably should have done months ago. I wrote down rules on a sticky note. 1. I am a husband, not a wallet. 2. If love needs an invoice, it isn't love. 3. Boundaries stay even when people get loud. 3 rules. Simple enough to remember, specific enough to enforce, and comprehensive enough to cover every type of financial manipulation the Morrison family had thrown at me. Rebecca updated me a few days later. They'd scrambled together $67,000 from asset sales and borrowing from friends. It wasn't even 3/4 of what they owed, but it was progress. More importantly, it was proof that they could find money when they absolutely had to, which meant all those years of "we just don't have it" had been complete BS. The marriage was effectively over. You can't love someone who sees you as a funding source rather than a person. Diana never apologized for missing my birthday while demanding money a week later, never acknowledged that 8 years of treating me like a human credit card might have been less than ideal relationship strategy. But I didn't need their apologies anymore. I had something better. A clean hotel room, a quiet mind, and the knowledge that I'd finally learned the difference between love and a business transaction where only one person was paying. 40 was finally, completely, entirely mine. And that birthday cake I ate alone? It was the first bite of freedom I'd tasted in years.